Imagine falling in love and facing prison for it. For thousands of couples, that was the truth over the last 300 years in the United States. I'm here to remind you that these racial categories aren't natural, that they were invented to keep us apart and to control us. This isn't just a history lesson, this is a reminder that this taboo was invented and about the couple that finally broke it. Dr. Katiana Scori-Falsetti, and this is Mixed Identity. In 1958, where the first question of whether interracial marriage was acceptable or not, most of the country said that it was not. Only 4% of people approved of interracial marriage. And this wasn't just an opinion. This came about through decades of law and fear. My parents were married in 1964, when there was much of that anti-racial marriage sentiment, just a few years after the Gallup poll. And it's come to light that my father's parents did not approve of the marriage between my father, who's from New England, and my mother, who's Japanese Brazilian. Although my mother's family approved and embraced my father and him joining the family, there was a lot of pushback from my father's parents when they returned to the United States after my father being in the Peace Corps. It was very hurtful for me to learn about the disapproval, which I did so through letters that I found from the 1960s when my father was in the Peace Corps to his parents, where they strictly disapproved of his intent to marry my mother because of the racial difference. Now, it was difficult because, I had fond memories of my grandparents, and it was hard to rectify that feeling of disapproval, although there was always an awareness of their preference to their white grandchildren. And I'm wondering what you all have experienced with this. It was helpful for me to do this research, though, to understand where their disapproval came from, and that this was through years of propaganda that the United States had been feeding to its population. The first law prohibiting interracial marriage was in the Virginia colony in 1661, which is ironic because interracial marriages were happening already for decades. The most celebrated and famous one is that with John Rolfe and Pocahontas, who married in 1614. And this was happening all over the colonies by the American Revolution in the 1770s. There were already thought to be between 60 and 120,000 people of mixed ancestry, and not all elites were against interracial marriage. Some founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry, actually approved of supporting mixed racial relationships. They saw it as a way to build a new American identity. Sadly, their beliefs were in the minority, and bands of interracial unions continued to grow across the country. Many elites propagated the belief that racial mixing would degrade the white race. This is an 1864 cartoon that shows that racial equality would degrade society, specifically against Abraham Lincoln. And not much later, the Supreme Court held up the ban, even though this was after the Civil War. In Pace v. Alabama, where a white woman and an African-American man were a couple, they couldn't marry because it was illegal, but they were still found to be together and sentenced to 2 years in state prison, and the Supreme Court upheld this. To keep the races apart, groups launched massive propaganda campaigns to discourage social interactions at all between races. This book by Daniel Okrent, called The Guarded Gate, is excellent and talks a lot about this history. There was indeed a eugenics records office that was created after the turn of the 20th century and knew that if people lived nearby, that people would start to mix. And so they tried to stop that through things like redlining and racial covenants, so they kept us physically apart in neighborhoods. And even eugenics certificates were created to show the, quote, perfect physical and mental balance of an individual, showing that they were fit to marry. Movies like The Black Stork warned against mingling with biologically inferior people. And in 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation was a blockbuster hit, which depicted African Americans as the enemy and the Ku Klux Klan as the saviors. This wasn't some movie that went under the radar. It was so popular that it was the first movie to ever be shown at the White House under the presidency of Woodrow Wilson. Other ways that the government tried to keep people apart was through weaponizing citizenship itself. In the 1907 Expatriation Act, an American woman would lose her citizenship for marrying a foreigner. And for many decades, Asian people from East and South Asia were not eligible for naturalized citizenship. By 1947, propaganda and laws had worked. The red states on this map show those that marriage or cohabitation were illegal. 30 states. In 18 states, it was legal. This divided people who were defined as white or Caucasian with other races. And remember that people's categories that they fell into were deemed by census takers, and individuals couldn't identify themselves or choose their racial category until 1960. Progress was made through much effort of groups and individuals, and less than 20 years later, the map had flipped. So now you see that it was legal in 33 states for interracial individuals to marry or live together, but still across all of the Southeast, it was banned. And it was really one couple who had the courage to change everything nationwide. These two individuals, Mildred Dolores Jeter and Richard Perry Loving, who changed everything. They grew up in Virginia and fell in love and wanted to marry. So to do so, they had to go to Washington, D.C. and get married. They went back to Virginia to live their lives, but their union was discovered and the police raided their house at night. They were grabbed and charged and faced imprisonment. With their fortitude and courage and the help of the ACLU, they were able to take their case to the Supreme Court, and they won, which we owe a huge debt of gratitude to them for doing so, because it really paved the way to our parents or our grandparents or us or others that you care about to be together. So I'm very grateful to them. It's a hugely inspiring story. There's a documentary about it and a 2016 movie about it called Loving. I'm very happy to say that by 2021, now the U.S. has a 94% approval rating of interracial marriage. It took a century of laws and propagating fear and misinformation to try to keep us apart, but ultimately they failed, thankfully. So let's celebrate that. I'd love to hear your experience about how your families felt about your parents, grandparents, or yourself coming together. I'm here to share the community, and I hope this video helps you understand the context if there was any negative sentiment. I want to remind you to know that you're enough. These categories are socially constructed, and you are wonderful for who you are as an individual. Thank you again for watching, and I appreciate your time. And if you like this, please let me know through a comment. Please like, subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.